to grow like wildfire. Can that happen? Yes. Does it happen? Yes. On a daily basis? Yes. Fact is, and it is unequivocal, is that hypergrowth is followed by hyperdecline.
Okay, we're back with Mark Beiderwieden, an absolute giant in our industry. And in our last session, we talked about the $1 billion opportunity. And he was reminding me that we should start small and keep grounded. And so I think we'll kick off this session talking about hypergrowth and to create realistic expectations.
I look forward to the conversation. I think this can be a really interesting session. There's so many thoughts that are out there and beliefs that if I've got my product and I've got my compensation plan and I've got some people who are going to go make it happen and we're going to grow like wildfire. Can that happen? Yes. Does it happen? Yes. On a daily basis? Yes. Fact is, and it is unequivocal, is that hypergrowth is followed by hyperdecline.
So it's a bell curve.
Yes. And I know no exception.
Oh, really?
I know no exception.
That's scary.
Yes. That will scare you. But
Yeah.
What is hypergrowth? What percentage is there when it's no longer manageable? Think about what's happening. You have people who are joining a business from all different walks of life, getting involved in a vision, having their own vision, loving a product, loving a compensation model, and taking off. And all of a sudden, they're going from being this in their previous life, and all of a sudden, there are 20, 50, or 100 people that they are now responsible for to motivate, train, help, you name it, in order to build the business. And all of a sudden, and I've seen this happen, is it doesn't matter whether they're young or old, that they're young in the business, they're not experienced as me, and they get a huge check, and there's a check on stage, and there's maybe thousands of people in the audience who are cheering their success, but they don't have enough experience on how to deal with the issues that those 1,000 people have.
Yeah.
And that is a reality. And so I believe that sustainable, whatever that number is, whether it's 6 or 8 or 10% growth, it's always going to be better. And I'm not talking about the first 3 months or 6 months. The infrastructure has to be there. We talked about that. We talked about the ABCs, what's necessary to start the business and do it right.
Yeah.
That holistic approach. But sales can't drive all of the decisions.
No.
Right? And the other components are equally necessary in order to make sure that this very strong growth path, which can be manageable, that is secure and it works, and the people are being trained properly at the right time, and that we don't have an army of people who are making claims about the business and about the opportunity of the business or about the products because they're just uninformed. They haven't gotten to the training yet. So putting training up front as a prerequisite to a particular qualification level, things like that can help manage the growth curve. You say, well, I need to grow faster. Well, you want to grow faster, that's fine, but what are you going to do when things start to erode and decay at the front end because you can't sustain what it is that your army's running to the next, but there's no support for the army, right? You know, the med tent and the supplies,
the supply line
show up, right?
Yeah.
There's no gas for the diesel for the tanks, right? What are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
Sorry to use that metaphor, but it's true, and it doesn't mean that is inevitable. There are when as you're growing your business, you might be in your first 5, 6, 8 markets, something like that. You're a $100 million company, you're a $200 million company, all wonderful. At some point, you're going to stagnate.
You plateau. It's an S curve, isn't it?
Right?
Yeah.
You plateau. And then the question is, okay, what are we going to have in place? What relationships do we have with the field? What have we done from day one to build trustworthy relationships with our field leaders so that when we get to those more difficult conversations, because we're not just cheering during the management conference because we've just broken through the next sales record levels, right? And we've got difficult conversations to have, that they understand that there is a business relationship there, that there's an adult relationship there, that everybody respects what the other people are doing, and that there are different interests. There are common interests as well, but the interests of company owners and of field leaders do tend to find their own way and over time. Hyper growth does not have to be followed by hyper decline if the infrastructure is in place. The plateau you're talking about.
Can I ask you something though? How do you prevent the hyper growth from happening? Because when the field gets excited,
right,
there's no holding them back.
Right.
They just go.
Right. That is a question that is very, very difficult to put an exact answer on, because there's hardly any field leader who is going to say, no, I don't want that next qualification level, or no, I don't want the size of the next check. We, and when under my responsibility, when we were approaching the opening of the Russian market, this is back around 2005-ish, something like that, we decided that we were not going to follow the marketplace. We were not going to follow the leaders. We were going to open the market with what we called RGS, the Russian Growth Strategy. And for the first time in the history that I knew with the company, opening up new markets, we brought together the functional heads of every single part of our business: sales, marketing, CSR, distribution, the supply, everybody, we brought them together and we said, we want to do Russia right. And we put together a holistic growth approach for the Russian market prior to opening, and put these things in place that historically had always been put in place later.
Okay.
And we put them in place from the front. And Russia grew exponentially, right? Because of amazing leadership, and from other markets, and people going there from the Czech Republic and from Poland and from Germany and from the US, and you name it. Everybody had Russian friends and neighbors, and it grew and grew and grew, and it became a $500 million business very, very quickly. And we had to laugh, because our corporate, our executive, or our staff, employee year-end bonuses were based on beating forecast. And when we got to 500 million, the forecaster said, next year you're gonna drop off. And the next year we were 500 million again. And we made a ton of money because they were wrong, because the fundamentals were there. And this happened 3 or 4 years in a row. And we beat the forecasters, the people who saw this model time and again, scratching their heads going, why didn't the hyper growth be followed by hyper decline? And it's because the fundamentals were in place, and we worked hand in hand with the field leadership, and we put these things in place, and the measures and the incentives. And
so what are the fundamentals?
We had something to be proud of. We had CSR plans in place already.
What is CSR plans for?
Corporate social responsibility.
Okay.
Right.
So that's your social side of it.
Right. Of something to rally around. We know that this is important to the community and the business to do that. We had the right incentives in place. We had the products in place. We had limited. We didn't take all of our products there. We took a limited number of products into the place. We had the right supply chain put in place.
Training.
Thank you. Training, the whole software side of things. Training was super important in this whole aspect. Training cannot be underestimated. I think it's probably one of the most important things, no matter what it is, whether it's a new product coming in, whether it's the compensation plan, whether it's training for new people, what they say about the business, and so on and so forth. All of those components were part of a holistic market approach. What's the comparison? What's the difference? Because in the past, you would say, okay, we're going to open up a new market, and in all likelihood, the distributors were already there in the first place. There was a reason that market was chosen.
Okay.
because activities had gone across borders. And I don't know if that's the case in all regions, but particularly here in Europe, because of all the
Everybody
families
knows
and
somebody.
everybody
Yeah.
knows somebody, and the products just kind of flew went across borders, and then we saw that there was activities there, and so you're kind of chasing the distributor activity
Yeah.
with your business strategy,
Yeah.
right? Which wasn't
Not necessarily what you should.
it is what it is,
Yeah.
right? It is what it is. Compliance, right? Product registration, huge, right? Especially people who don't live in Europe think that, you know, vitamin C has the same. It's in EU, and so it's the same dosage in all markets. Couldn't be anything further from the truth, right? And that's true with your product registrations. It's true with your business model. It's true with your compensation models, and so on. So,
And the laws around it.
and everything surrounding it, and so compliance and everything that belongs to that, your due diligence, making sure that you're there as a legal entity. You've done whatever might be necessary with political connections, talking to the right people in the government, saying, here we're coming and this is what we're going to do, and how, right? Just having all those, a holistic approach to opening a market. Totally different approach than ensuring that product goes across a border and maybe is registered and paying your compensation plan through an existing market and things like that, right? Both approaches work, right? Both approaches work.
But of course, now we're talking about now the hyper growth.
Right.
And to stop the hyper decline, what you do is you actually plan properly so before you launch, before you sign up that first distributor, everything is in place.
Right.
You've done your due diligence. You've worked through every single possible problem that you can come up. Your training is in place, the product's in place, your supply chain's in place, your warehousing is in place, everything.
And distributor engagement. And getting those top leaders to understand why we're doing this. We were so open with our top leaders about why it's necessary to take the time to do it right. And they were experienced enough, and they had seen other markets that had done, the bell curve, and so they were willing to go with us.
And the problem is, for the CEO who's watching this, they're thinking, well, I'm getting thousands of dollars of sales in this market already. All I need to do is set up a warehouse and I'm up and running.
What could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? Exactly right. And so and I've seen it happen in our own space where we are in South Africa. We've obviously got all of these countries around us, and everybody knows somebody because there's a lot of migrant workers in South Africa. And so the products suddenly are in Botswana and Namibia and Zambia and Zimbabwe. And suddenly the company owner is thinking, wow, I've just pulled the lever and the money's pouring out of the machine. Here's an easy route into all of these countries, but nothing could be further from the truth. Starting in a new country is fraught with problems. Yep. I mean, you've done it, so you'd be better off telling me than.
No, you're absolutely right, and we've done it both ways. We've done it and regretted that we didn't do it the other way first, right? And this is why we took the leap of faith and got the approval from the headquarters to do Russia different, and it worked. And a lot of this,
and that market's still going.
Russia, I believe, has actually been closed because of the war.
Of course.
Right,
oh wow,
right.
That's harsh.
And so I do not envy the European leadership that had to deal with the current situation here, because all of Europe is basically under leadership and from a corporate perspective, and that's
a tough one. Hey,
it's a real tough one. I really don't know what the situation is today. Yeah.
So again, geopolitical considerations come into when you launch into a region. You've got to actually take everything into account.
Kind of understand what you're getting into, right? And this is a different rabbit trail, Richard, but it's amazing how different perspectives are on starting business. You can't just. China's a huge market, but you can't just go in and start a multi-level marketing, because it's perfectly illegal to do that. You can work in direct selling, but you've got to find a way. You've got to find ways to adapt your compensation plan accordingly, so that the government officials will accept that. And right now, nobody's starting new at all, to the extent that I'm informed correctly. It's
In somewhere like China, you mean?
yeah, exactly.
They've just put a stop to it.
And you go to Vietnam, and they have data protection laws in place that are so difficult to get around, where they say everything has to be on a local server, but you're not allowed to send information anywhere outside of Vietnam. I'm like, okay, now how do we make that work, right? And this was that's a true story. Whether it's still that way today, it was that way 5 years ago
Yeah.
when we were dealing with some issues there. And then the same issue with Vietnam is they said, I think there was something. Not going to say make a mistake and say the number of provinces that they have there, but we had to have a local office in every single province.
Wow.
Okay. And so you had to find a way to work around that, right? And so on. So they were looking for physical presence, uh, bricks and mortar in every single province to say that this is a real business, because the people who were making the laws were thinking retail and thinking outlets, and that they couldn't deal with this independent business owner topic, right? And they had to be educated accordingly from the top down, and so on. And that goes through every single country, everywhere. There are different things, different little nuances in doing business, even between Germany and Austria and Switzerland. Excuse me, Italy, right?
And also, I mean, you need to think about this in terms of your own country. If you're a startup,
Yeah.
you need to get behind the rules and the laws of your own country, because compliance, we're going to get into compliance. I don't want to get into it in this session, but compliance with what is going on in that country, that is obviously a big topic.
Yeah, I look forward to the topic. I won't go there right now, but compliance is a major portion of your growth strategy.
Well, I think this segment,
this is all about growth.
yeah, I think this segment of hyper growth, there's a upside to this, which is these businesses can grow to, as you said, Russia went to $500 million business.
Yeah.
I mean, what CEO sitting listening to this doesn't think to himself, well, that would work for me. I can do $500 million.
Right.
But it can go equally south just as quickly if you haven't done your homework and you haven't put everything in place.
Right.
So you can get this huge ramp up and crash. And we've seen it. We had a client of ours, who went up to 60 million in 6 months. And then within 2 months, the business was bankrupt, was gone. So within a period of 8 months, he'd gone from zero to hero to nothing.
Right.
And everything I told him to do, he ignored. Everything. He went out and bought fancy houses. He was driving, comes and collects me at the airport in a Ferrari. All of the things that he was bragging to me that he now has rich man problems. Well, he's now got back to poor man problems. And so this hyper growth and big crashes, it's a very real thing. And I think this warning that you've made here is well taken.
And it shouldn't be negative. It's due diligence. You wouldn't start any other business any other way either.
No.
Right. And so
you shouldn't.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't. And if you're having this deliberation right now, if you're thinking about getting into this amazing industry because you think you've got a product and a story and the wherewithal to make this happen, then look for the conversation, not with those that are 80 million in 2 years. Look for those that have been around for 5 or 10 years already, and look at what they put. The information's out there. Make a phone call, make a contact with the CEO. Call us, call you, call somebody. Talk about those things openly, because it's so important. You can get that hyper growth, but you want it for a year or for 2, or do you want something that you're going to hand over to your children with pride 10 or 15 or 20 years from now, because it's been a sustainable, it's got a great reputation. We've got hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are motivated about representing our products. That's the question you have to ask yourself up front. Because if you want to just take the profit of the 60 million and run for the hills, you can do that, but it's going to hurt our industry, and it's not what we want to be part of.
So definitely not. That is exactly the opposite of what you want to do, because the damage that does reputational to the field, people think, oh, this is a complete scam. And then you've got a guy running off with the 60 million. I mean, that's just absolutely the opposite of what we're trying to do here.
So this, I'll go there because this is super important. You've got a lot of field leaders. So how do you start when you start your business? One of the key components is going to be having those right people in place who are going to run with it, because you might not be doing it yourself unless you've got the experience. Okay, so you need people to be on board with you to start the sales force growth and the sale of the products. I caution, I caution to be cherry picking somebody who's working with another company and is willing to take take his group and his organization from that other company, show no loyalty or respect to where he's come from, and just take them and come over, and you're going to buy that leader, you're going to buy his organization, bring him in. I caution, that hurts our reputation of our business, and the person that you're talking to probably doesn't have the credibility that is worth working together with, because it's going to happen to you again. He's going to take the hyper growth from you, and then he's going to go on to the next opportunity, and he's going to do it again and again and again. And if he says, I was a kingpin with this company, with this company, with this company, and with this company, I look for the guy who's been with the company for 20 years, right? And I'm not going to cherry pick him. I'm going to have an adult conversation with him about what would he do, how did he start, and what would he recommend to me to start my own business. I'm not trying to cherry pick him.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
Never.
And that's the thing. It's a little bit like marrying a cheater. That's how I see it. If you go and steal somebody from somebody else's network, it's like marrying a cheater, because the guaranteed they're going to cheat on you for sure. And when they do, it can undermine your whole business. You're much better off finding somebody, working with them, building them up, creating the loyalty, helping them build their business, and doing it at a more slow pace than going and grabbing a leader from somewhere else. And on top of it, when you grab that leader, I mean, we're getting down a complete, you see here, we go off in the wrong direction.
But it's important. It's all part about growth strategy.
Yeah. And when you grab that leader, what happens is he brings all of his belief systems with him. So now he's been sold on that compensation plan, and he's got all sorts of problems with your comp plan. They did it this way. Why aren't you doing it that way? They did this for me. Why aren't you doing this for me? And now suddenly you're playing catch up with a guy who's been brainwashed by another company and is not part of your culture. I mean, to now try and mold that person, you're trying to put a square peg into a round hole. To mold that person to your culture is very difficult. You're better off creating your own culture from day one.
So first of all, I have to be funny, because when you're from South Africa, when you say marrying a cheetah, is it CHEETAH? The first thing I went to was marrying a cheetah, and then you said, but he cheated on you, and then it's CHEAT.
Very fast person. They're in and out.
Sorry about that. It was funny, but it's true. There are no loyalties then whatsoever. You just said the most important component, and that is, what is your vision? What is your culture? What is it that you want to be? What do you want to stand for as a company? I've seen these contemplations. It's not just something you just write down and that's your vision and mission statement, right? You got to live it. It's got to be what brings you back, right? I've heard promises from the owners of Amway. Amway has never left a market that it started in. We will never leave behind the people that we gave a promise to, that they will have a business opportunity. And they kept that promise for over 60 years. That's an amazing value set, right? No matter what, no matter how big, how small, how profitable, whatever, we're not leaving that market. And what are those key parts of the beliefs and the values of the business that you want to start, that are always going to ground me, that I'm always going to refer back to in my decision-making process?
Yeah.
That's key.
Yeah.
That's got to be a big part of the growth strategy as well. Is what do we stand for? Who are we?
Yeah. Right. And what kind of culture do we want to create?
Exactly.
And if you can create that culture, you create loyalty.
Absolutely.
And that loyalty will be there for the next 20, 30, 50 years. Because I know for Amway, for example, I know where there's the third and fourth generation of people involved in the business, you know, and it's been passed on from family member to family member, and there's loyalty. You cannot shift. I mean, I know for a fact, you cannot shift Amway distributors with dynamite. These guys are so locked into that business, and there's such a sense of belonging, and their culture is so strong. Very, very difficult to shift them.
Right? And it's both internal and external. When I say external, I mean the field participants, and internal meaning corporate staff. There's just as many, not just family members, there are just as many sons and daughters of executives or other workers from the warehouse all the way through every function of the business, who just love the company, who just love being part of this. But why? Where does the loyalty come from? It's because those promises are kept, because they see that the words that are spoken on stage or the words that are printed of freedom, hope, family, reward, it's not just uh, written in stone in the corporate headquarters to have some place to make
It's not a platitude.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's real, and you can give those examples of where the families and the leaders of the company, whether it's executives or whether it's field leaders, where they live those values in real life, in their decision making, and not just because somebody's watching, and not just because it sounds good to or looks good to a reporter or in print or in media or whatever, because it's real, and it's real, and the path that I went down and the experiences that I had with this amazing company, Amway, I would do everything over again, every single time, because it was an amazing ride. It's a wonderful company with wonderful family members who truly live the values of their founding fathers and mothers, who were part of equally supporting everybody's. It's an amazing company with an amazing value set, and it's because they live. They don't just speak it; they do it.
Yeah.
They really live it, and I would encourage anybody thinking about starting in this business is to think about what is it that I want to stand for. What do I want on my tombstone? Right? What are people going to say about me and my business when I'm not in the room? Right.
Yeah. And so, look, I mean, we're coming into the end of this session, and the whole concept of this hyper growth. I think if the key takeaways for me are that you must actually put a plan in place. You must make sure that you've covered all of your bases.
Yeah.
You mustn't go out and rape other people's networks. Build your own network.
Yes.
And get your own people and create your own culture.
Yes.
And then make sure you understand what that culture is, what you stand for, and then live that. I think that basically covers all of those.
Absolutely.
Mark, that was excellent. What a cool session.
Yes, very much fun.
Thank you very much.